Welcome to Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik. Joline, as always, good to see you. I see you have a guest ready to go, so let's get right to it. Why don't you introduce your guest and tell us what you'll be discussing on this podcast?
Great. So, Jen, welcome. I'm delighted, RJ, to introduce Jen Fox here today to the rest of the audience, because Jen has been an important coach for me for quite a long time now. And when we were talking about parents as coaches to their children, it seemed as though the ideas that Jen has are completely applicable, not just to grown-ups, but to the next generation. So, Jen, thank you for joining me. I hope the wisdom that we talk about today can be appreciated by listeners, because I do think I've learned so much. And when we discussed this topic, it just made sense. So I'm wondering if you'll begin by telling a little bit about yourself and how you came to coaching, and then we'll just jump in.
Thank you, Joline. So happy to be here with you today. So I came to coaching in perhaps a slightly unusual path, and that is that my career has really been in wealth management. I have led teams, advised clients, worked with families. And what I found, especially being a wealth management executive later, that one of the things that helped me be really successful, and therefore our teams be very successful, was unlocking the performance of folks on my team through coaching, mentoring, encouragement, finding ways to help people understand what makes them the best of who they are. And I said, you know what, that's what I love to do. So let's run at it. And so I've been coaching executives, leaders, college students, other folks around kind of how can they enhance their overall effectiveness in their performance. And part of the philosophy around this, and it's been science-backed because I believe in proof points of how do you make sure that what you're doing leads to results. And we really focus on a lot of pillars of performance, things like, where's your focus? Are you clear in who you are and what you do? How's your energy? How do you become more productive? Which, by the way, is often everyone's first question. How do I get to be more productive? But then how do you bring your courage and your influence in every situation that you're in? And so what's been exciting about it and what I love is how, as you said, Joline, it is completely applicable to multi-generations. It's not just for CEOs. It applies to children. It applies to teenagers. I had the opportunity to teach at Villanova University, and I use a lot of my coaching techniques with my students that I teach at 8:30 in the morning. So talking about energy at 8:30 in the morning before class is really helpful.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because when we first decided we would do this conversation, I thought back to my own parents, and I wish somebody had talked to my parents when I was a little girl about coaching, because clearly that was not in the culture in those days. And I think for a very long time, we've not really talked about what the role of parents is in terms of communicating to children. It has been much more, the role of a parent is to help a kid grow up. And if that is a sermon or a lecture or instruction, that's what you do because you want kids to be safe. But can you talk a little bit about how you think the role of parenting is evolving and why coaching makes more sense in this current era?
Yeah, I think the way you describe parenting, at some points you have to use a little bit of all, right? That you have to teach and educate. Yes, unfortunately, at times there's discipline. But the coaching part of it, where I see that becoming more important, is first, I do think when you're in a coaching mindset, you're letting your child really develop into their own person. And you do that by asking a lot of questions They don't have to be easy questions, especially as they get older. They can be challenging questions, but asking them kind of, well, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Tell me what your thought process is, because that discussion is the opportunity to hear how they're thinking, how they're evolving their thinking, where you can then influence their thinking if you think that it's kind of going outside of what will make them a human being. So the coaching part of it is really that at times you need to be the listener. Times you need to ask the questions. And then in coaching, we really push. So we challenge. So I was just with a client. One of the things that they said that they use with their children that I thought was beautiful, and it I think applies to all of us as humans, is that when you're interacting, ask them, do you want to be heard? Do you want to be helped? Or do you want to be hugged? Because if you think of the conversations that you have with your children, sometimes do you want to be heard? They need to vent with you, and then you can ask the questions. Sometimes they actually need help, but don't know how to ask for it. So asking that can help them. And sometimes the hug, they just need that reinforcement. So being that coach is one where you celebrate them, but then you also really challenge them to help them continue to strive for kind of the best of who they can be.
Well, I think those three options, if the listener today takes anything away, is just those three options. Actually, I hope they do take, because it's such a quick note for parents to remember. And you remind me of the boys and fishing stories I tell all the time, which for anyone listening, I'll just remind people there are two dads. These are real things that happened to me. Two dads, two sons, similar events, but different outcomes. And in the first one, the dad followed his son into a room where I was waiting for the family to come in. And the son was, in a very excited way, ready to tell me about his latest fishing adventure. And right behind him, his dad just closed him down by saying, "Oh, Adam, there's more to life than fishing." And that was the end of that kid's storytelling. 6 weeks later, another family meeting, another kid about the same age, he came in, also said to me, "Ms. Godfrey, I've got a story about fly fishing I want to tell you." Interestingly, his dad was right behind him, and his dad picked up on the story and expanded on it. I think of that as you talk, because this difference between opening kids up and closing them down is such a delicate process. It can happen so quickly and easily. Can you talk a little bit about how parents check themselves for which way they're going?
I think that goes into thinking about what your own emotion is in the situation. Because being a parent myself, I know there's those moments where you are just unbelievably frustrated and kind of reacting as opposed to responding to your child. And so always thinking about what's that reaction and how can I think of this is that this is a person who I'm related to, think the world of, but I'm also trying to bring them up to be a confident, secure person as they get older. And so our reactions have a lot of impact on that security and confidence.
Mm.
What I would say is part of the coaching there is that we talk a lot about clarity in coaching. And clarity is really, who are you at your best self? And I think for parents, it's really important to think of that in the context of parenting is when I am at my best as a mom or a dad, what's happening? Is it because I'm feeling relaxed? Is it because I'm listening? Am I feeling, what am I feeling and what's happening in that situation? And write it down. Remember what those words are that you are using to describe who you are when you are your best self as a parent. And the reason why I say write them down is keep it visible and remember, because the more you see those words, it more reinforces of like, yeah, I am a good mom. Yeah, I am a good dad. And this is how I do this really well. And it can sometimes help you flip the script when you're feeling stressed. The other part of clarity is to think about your interactions with others. And so in this case, interactions with your son or daughter. What do I want my son or daughter to feel about our interactions? How do I want them to feel about me as a parent? How do I want them to feel as they're growing up? Do I want them to feel challenged? Do I want them to feel secure? Do I want them to feel excited? Again, things of how I want my child to feel in my parenting relationship. And then the last thing is, what's your definition of success as a parent? And I know that this is sounding like, whoa, I have not spent any time. Honestly, I don't know that I spent a lot of time thinking about this as a parent, but in hindsight, and now as my children are older, I continue to think of what is a successful relationship with my children? And how do I continue to have the conversations, change my own behavior where appropriate, because my behavior is the only behavior I can really control. So what can I do to help kind of on this journey of being a parent with that ultimate outcome? Now, that sounds so easy, and it's not. Will have difficulties at different stages for different reasons. The grade schooler or middle schooler will have its own challenges where you might need to rethink of, okay, what is success for a middle schooler right now? What is success for my high schooler? What is success for my college student, young adult? Because their needs will change and you will have matured as a parent.
Yeah, as I listen to you, I think this all makes such good sense, particularly developmentally. How you coach a little one is different from an older child. But I can imagine somebody listening and saying, "Oh, this makes sense to me. I'm going to try this, but I'm not sure my spouse is going to take these lessons to heart." So really what I'm thinking about is whether it's a spouse, an aunt, or an uncle, a grandparent, this affects the entire family system. And we all have those uncles or grandparents or our spouse who has a much more didactic or clearer sense of what a kid should hear. Do you have any advice about how to intervene or how to shift the behavior of somebody who's maybe not so open to self improvement when it comes to learning how to coach? I mean, this can be pretty delicate within the family system.
Agreed. And I think that, again, in some ways, requires the same thought process that you have with your child of, okay, if grandma is going to say this, and I know that that's who she is, how do I think of that reaction? How can I react or respond to her in a way that protects the child, but in a way that's done, in the way that is authentic to you. So I know you hear all the stories, and Jolene, I'm sure you've heard more than I, of people who say, don't do that. You know, that's not how we talk to our kids or things like that. And it creates this wall, this sense of stress. So being able to be thoughtful before you have those conversations, again, it doesn't fix it 100%, and it may not, but it helps you control your reaction so that your response is more measured and calm and ultimately more impactful. And so with a spouse, likely harder. I think that requires different kind of values conversations around how do the two, both parents determine what success looks like in raising your child and having open conversations outside of the children's earshot on that one, but being able to say, this is how we want to parent together.
Yeah.
It is okay to have different parenting styles, but it's more of understanding where they are complementary versus where they conflict and trying to solve the conflict and lean more into the complementary style.
One of the things I think about as I listen to you is that what you're talking about in kind of a meta way is the evolution of parenting. And we are thinking about how young people are changing, how the world is changing, and how we get more sophisticated about communication. And I have said recently that I'm very pro family. I am more pro family by the day, in part because I think if you can build a thriving family, you can build a thriving community, and you can build a thriving country, which God knows we need these days. And I do think this idea, though, that we are becoming more sophisticated in our communication within the family is relatively new. What do you think has really prompted our rethinking about how we communicate with one another across generations and with one another? What's going on out there?
Oh, Jolene, I think there's so many things that are going on. A couple things that I think of immediately is that first, we have so many generations alive at the same time. So navigating the different languages across generations is requiring a different level of sophistication and understanding. I think that access to information, as we all know, is widespread. So, um, I still think we all leave the hospital saying, wait, I don't feel like I should be able to walk out of this hospital with a baby. Like, I just don't feel like I'm prepared for that.
Right. I think that's right.
But what I think is happening now is that kind of culture of there's information out there. Let me find the information. Let me figure out how we can communicate is very helpful. But the other part, and you and I have had these conversations, is that with social media, with that advance of all kinds of information, I think that folks are trying to find where is my community of real people. We all have our own communities, but where's my personal community? And you are absolutely right. It starts with your family. And if that is what's so important of that community, what can I do to make sure that this family really works? And I think that's where sophistication is coming from, is that all of these forces together are creating this desire to really have meaningful connections with the people that are closest to us.
Yeah, so I love your hospital story because what you and I both hear is there needs to be a manual for this. And it occurs to me there kind of is now. I mean, I think about the work we do at Bounce. We're doing manuals for parents all the time. And you're really providing a kind of coaching manual, if you will,
Mhm.
so that this notion that we don't have any instruction was real for a very, very long time. It's less real now. I mean, you do have access to role models, to real people. I mean, I might not like it, but I know TikTok has role models that parents watch. And hopefully, listeners will take this away as, oh, that would be an interesting experiment to try. And I do think innovation in the family is something that is just getting started, but I love the kind of catalyst that you're offering up to get people to think and behave differently within the context of family.
Jolene, there's a word that you just said that I want to hop on, and that's experiment. Because that's something that we talk about in coaching a lot, is that we have folks coming to us saying that I feel stuck, I've plateaued, there's something that things are going really well, but I want to do better. We share experiment a lot because experiment is action.
Right.
It's not going to try, because a lot of people, when they say try, means I've tried once. But experimenting is this ongoing action of finding ways to do things better or differently that get the positive results that you want. And I think for parents, especially, experiment, because a lot of us have never done this before, and it's okay. When you get all of this information, you still have to do something with it. And not all of the advice that you get is going to land well, because you've got lots of personalities, strong wills, especially when they're teenagers or younger. It's experimenting with what's happening, and also having kind of the self-awareness that if something didn't work, let your child know that it didn't work and say,
Right.
apologizing to a child can be one of the most powerful examples that you can set for a child of saying that, you know what, mom can make a mistake too. And I didn't mean that to make you feel bad. So I'm sorry about that. That behavior is so important. But the coaching part of it too is that as a parent, you can get stuck saying, I feel like I've tried everything and something's not working. Being able to talk it out, think through of, okay, what's happening? What's going on with you? What's going on in the situation? How have you thought about this from your own perspective of, can you be okay that yes, your child's going to be really strong-willed and only want to eat chicken nuggets this week?
Right.
I don't mean to belittle it, but I also I also know that how frustrating that mindset can be. So being able to work with someone to say that, you know what, you are doing a good job. It's experiment a little bit more, find ways to celebrate what's going really well, and enjoy this journey of parenthood with your child.
Yeah, the enjoyment factor, I think, is so important. And also just bringing kids into the experiment in a conscious way so they know that you're welcoming them in and that they're trying something new. The transitional moment we're in, where the nature of parenting is literally changing because of all the factors you laid out, I think is such a golden opportunity for kids. But we used to talk about, well, when I was growing up, and it really is different now from when I was growing up because there are all these resources that in the scope of history didn't exist. And now they do. Helping kids understand that this is a collaboration, really, rather than just an authoritative experience. You know, the other thing I'd love to have a whole other conversation on, Jen, is that I think this is the end of the patriarchy. Because if you think about it, coaching is what undermines the top down, I'm going to tell you, authoritarian nature of the patriarchy, which is how families worked for millennia because it was efficient. And I am not here to diss the patriarch because I do think it's a very efficient form of family. And yet, it isn't as effective today because kids do have access to so much other information and they do want to be part of the experiment. So I think what you're teaching and coaching is so critical at this moment in time. Where do you see this going? I can see that we're racing through time here, and I know that RJ is going to come over my shoulder momentarily. But what do you see the future of family as being? Where do you see this going as a result of these new techniques?
So again, as I said earlier, it's about building community. So my children were born digital natives. Children today are born AI native. So the the idea of creating that physiological connection, which as humans we desperately need. It's a required component of our physiology is to have human connection. Parenting is creating that physiological connection with your family, that community that gives your children that sense of safety and security that they can then grow off of. So, the future of parenting, I think, is finding ways to protect that family community, but also expand it, bring others into it, reinforce that personal connection so that as we look at the impact of technology, which our children are absolutely going to be benefited and harmed by technology, but by having that personal physiological connection with them, gives them that security that they can experiment and figure out what works best. So there's a lot more to come, obviously, but I don't envision a day when kind of robots take over parenting. I think it's more of understanding of what makes us human is what makes us good parents.
Oof. I think this is such an important thing to say, and I totally agree with you that the future of parenting is humanity because, AI and apps are not parents. This is a really important thing to keep in mind. RJ, I see you are here with us. Darn it. Uh, I think, Jen, I want to thank you. I think this is such an important conversation, especially on this last idea or this last theme of what's the role of a parent. And it is to be the humanizing connective tissue in the family. And I think this approach, the whether you call it coaching or connectivity, this is what more and more families are hoping that they're going to get better at. So I want to thank you immensely. This was great.
Yes. Okay. Before Jen goes, how about a way people can contact you, Jen?
Sure. People can connect me. My email address is the easiest. It's Jennifer at andfox.com, ANDFOX.com, or our website, which is andfox.com.
Excellent. And Joline.
Our website, of course, is www.bounce-10.com. And I hope you will also go to the podcast and make sure that you re-listen to this one, because I think the advice Jen has shared with us is really essential today. So thanks, RJ. Good to be here again.
Yes, great to have you. And I agree. The conversation you had with Jen was very interesting to listen to as I sat back in the background and was just listening. It was very fascinating. And we're looking forward to your next podcast. And thank you for listening to today's Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. If possible, rate this podcast and leave a review, because this actually helps others find the show. Until our next podcast, for Joline Godfrey, I'm RJ Malik.